Captains of an Apache crew with a rarely seen but truly meaningful award. Honestly, no aviator ever hopes to be in the position of this crew, but sometimes bad things happen to good pilots. CW3 Daniel Hainje and CW2 Michael Bailey will receive the Broken Wing Award today, which is conveyed by the Army's Combat Readiness Center on aircrew members who display extraordinary skill, judgment, and technique during in-flight emergency. In spite of circumstances which may lead to catastrophic results, this award is presented to aircrew members who achieve a successful landing through the application of the highest degree of aviator proficiency. Those that were in Afghanistan last year probably remember the story well, and it is one that I will certainly never forget as I watched unfold from my talk in Bagram. But for those who were not there, here is what happened just past midnight and into the early morning hours of 18 March 2016. CW3 Hainje, the pilot in command, and CW2 Bailey were flying their AH-64 as part of an attack weapons team supporting a partnered Afghan National Army and Polish Special Forces operation in Helmand Province, Afghanistan. The crew was in cruise flight with good weather for southern Afghanistan. The lead and trail aircraft were approximately 4 kilometers apart, flying at 70 knots, and building a clearance of fires for multiple enemy fighters in the vicinity of the assault force. At that time, the aircraft experienced a catastrophic tail rotor malfunction where the entire tail rotor assembly separated from the aircraft. The departing tail rotor damaged multiple portions of the aircraft to include the stabilator, a main rotor blade, and the number 1 engine nacelle. Mr. Hainje was on the controls utilizing FLIR while Mr. Bailey was utilizing TDAC and utilizing TADS while still under goggles. Both crew members heard 2 loud thuds and immediately experienced a forward shift to the center of gravity and a heavy right yaw. Mr. Hainje reduced the collective, nosed the aircraft over to gain airspeed, and utilized the vertical stabilizer to offset the torque. Mr. Bailey announced that they were going down. Mr. Hainje, maintaining a very calm demeanor, told his front seater they were good and directed him to assist with the emergency. Mr. Hainje kept the collective fully reduced to minimize the yaw, and once reaching 115 knots, returned to a 90-knot attitude to see if level flight was possible to continue to conduct a roll-on landing to a runway. Mr. Hainje attempted to raise the collective for continued flight, but even just a slight increase resulted in a near uncontrollable yaw of the aircraft. At that time, he was able to call his wingman over the radio and notify them that they had lost their tail rotor and had to land. Mr. Bailey pointed out an open field that would be the most advantageous place, and Mr. Hainje directed the landing area continued the auto rotation to the ground. They then discussed that Mr. Bailey would have to retard the power levers as they approached the ground in order to prevent the aircraft from yawing to the right. Mr. Hainje pulled in power to arrest their rate of descent, and based on the terrain, which were farming fields and semi-rough, they began decelerating the aircraft while maintaining rotor RPM, as they felt they would need to land with as little forward airspeed as possible. As the aircraft began to decelerate, Mr. Bailey slowly pulled the power levels back to maintain the aircraft's nose in alignment with the intended touchdown point, and just prior to touchdown at approximately 20 feet, the aircraft lost all electrical power due to the low rotor RPM. Mr. Bailey maintained the nose alignment with the intended point of touchdown, and both crew members placed the aircraft on the ground. The aircraft came to a stop in the field without rolling over, and the crew members conducted the emergency engine shutdown. Ultimately, the crew coordination and simultaneous dual control manipulation of the aircraft saved the lives of the crew and minimized the damage to the aircraft. Had this not been in Afghanistan, the story would have ended there. But this was a combat theater, and the aircraft and crew were now on the ground in an urban area of Helmand Province with a high enemy threat. Mr. Hainje zeroized the aircraft and exited the helicopter. At the same time, Mr. Bailey grabbed his weapon to conduct 360-degree security of the aircraft. They immediately contacted their wingman and continued to provide security. Their wingman coordinated the launch of the Quick Reaction Force with the Task Force Comanche TOC to extract them and start the movement of the ground assault force towards their aircraft. Both pilots were extracted via CH-47 approximately 20 minutes after touchdown, and the Quick Reaction Force was in place to secure the aircraft. Both crew members had minor injuries, yet stand before us today to accept these awards, which is the best part and ending to this story. The lessons of this story are far-reaching for every aviation crew member in 4th Cab and across Army Aviation, because they are things we talk about every time we go fly, because like this crew, you never know what the flight ahead holds. So number one, know your emergency procedures, limitations, and the aerodynamics of your aircraft. Practice your emergency procedures, both in the aircraft and in simulation. It could save your life. Remain calm in an emergency and rely on your training